So next is let's play with some variations. What happens if you thought you wanted to issue it at 10%, but the market thinks otherwise? The market requirement is 13%. And we'll do a couple of changes and different variations of the changes. First is right here, what happens if the change occurs at time 0? Secondly, what happens if the change occurs at time 4, after year 4? And what happens to the bond value as these rates change? And what is the difference when it happens year 0 versus when it happens in year 4? So let's do those variations in Excel. All right, so we can use this variation, use the base case for a variation. So I'm going to just copy this whole set. Copy, and I'll have to do a little modification, but let's start with the base case. And we'll put it right here. And the change we have to make is the interest rate is still the same. It's the face amount of 1,000 times the coupon rate of 0.1. So that's the same. The principal is the same, so that's 1,000. So those are the cash flows. The yield to maturity, however, is different. It's going to be, it goes to 13. So 13 is 0.13. And the formula, now we have to modify also, is that we had made it an absolute reference. Let's get rid of that. And let's now pick this new rate, make that the absolute reference, and now we're good to go. Copy that across. And we take the present values, just F1 to check it, or F2 to check it. Yep, that looks right. And let's do another year just to make sure it's still right. It's still right. So now if we sum those cash flows, then we get the new price. So notice that the price before was $1,000. And that was when the marketplace was happy paying amount of money because the yield was okay. However, this new scenario is that the percentage yield is not okay. We want 13%, not 10. That would drive down the price because we have to discount the price to give the investors the yield that they require, the 13%. So what happens is the increase in interest rate at time 0 causes a fairly dramatic drop in the value of that bond. All right. The next scenario is what happens if that change happens in year 4. So I'm going to just copy this whole thing. Copy, and let's put it there. So here, the scenario changes for us now. It changed to year 4. So what happens is, notice that in year 4, we're done with this set, right? So that means how many years do we have left? We only have 6 years left. Year 1, at that point, becomes the 5th year. So one way to think about it is we're going to truncate. This whole thing disappears. And we're going to move forward this amount. Oops, sorry. And this whole thing now moves up to year 6. Because we're in year 4, so that this becomes the 5th year, 6th year, 7th year, 8th year, 9th year, 10th year. So this is now the new cash flow as of the end of year 4. We have 6 years left. Okay, so now the yield to maturity of 13% is applied to this cash flow, and let's check it. Okay, so to be very, very safe, we're going to change that reference to this, and everything else looks okay. So we're going to copy that over here, and here these are really not applicable. We just delete it because they're distracting. And so the PVs, we're going to just copy. Well, let's look at it first. That looks okay. I copy that, and we have that. So now we see that if the change in interest rate to 13% occurs in year 4, which means there's 6 years remaining, then the value is 832. All right. So now let's ask a couple of questions. And the questions were, in which direction does the value go if the market rates go up? So that is answered by the first comparison. If the market goes up from 10 to 13 at exactly the same time, what will happen is the price will drop, right? That's this notion that as the yield required increases, then the bond price will drop to enable the investor to get the yield they seek. So price directionally goes down when interest rates rise, right? It's an opposite effect. Now the next question is what happens when it happens in year 0 versus what happens to the price if the change occurs in year 4. And that's this comparison. If it happens at T0, then the drop is to 834. If it happens at T4 instead of T0, then the price is 832. And so we see that the price change is lessened if it were for 6 years versus for 10 years. And that's because the time over which we earn our extra interest is now shortened. So therefore, we need to pay a lower amount of money because that $1,000 is going to happen sooner, right? The biggest difference between this cash flow and this cash flow is that we've moved up this big payment at the end. So therefore, you're willing to, the value is lesser to you because you get a little bit of cash flow improvement here, and this amount of money is then lessened.